So today, we're going to dive into the life of Bimbisara, a man who took the small kingdom of Magadha and basically drew the blueprint for India's first great empire. His story is an absolute masterclass in politics, but it's also, at its heart, a really profound personal tragedy.
And yeah, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? How does a ruler with such strategic genius, a guy who built an empire using diplomacy just as much as conquest, meet such a brutal, terrible end at the hands of his own son? It's a story of ambition, power, and the ultimate betrayal.
Okay, so to really get Bimbisara's genius, we first have to understand the world he was born into. This wasn't some unified India, no way. It was a fractured, messy, and fiercely competitive place.
I want you to picture a map from that time, around the 6th century BCE. It's filled with these 16 warring kingdoms, the Mahajanapadas, all scrapping for supremacy. You've got heavyweights like Kosala, Avanti, and Vatsa dominating the scene. In this kind of environment, it was constant conflict. Survival meant you had to be either the strongest warrior or the absolute sharpest strategist. And Bimbisara's kingdom, Magadha, it was just one of the players, and its rise to the top was anything but guaranteed. And that phrase, historically verifiable, that's a huge deal. See, before Bimbisara, a lot of the rulers we know about are from myths and epic tales. But with Bimbisara, the historical records, the archaeology, the religious texts, they all start to line up. He gives us our first real, solid foothold in the timeline of Indian history. And get this, he took the throne at just 15 years old, inheriting a kingdom with some potential, but completely surrounded by powerful enemies. So how on earth did a teenage king manage to turn a small regional power into the seed of a massive empire? Well, Bimbisara wasn't just about brute force. He developed this brilliant two-part strategy that would basically become the model for empire building in India for centuries to come. And his strategy? It was just so elegant, so simple, but man, was it effective. It boiled down to this. First, you conquer what you absolutely have to. Second, for everything else, you make alliances. This two-pronged approach let him expand his power super efficiently, minimizing his risks while maximizing his influence. It was a total masterstroke of statecraft. So his first big move? Oh, it was personal. His father had been beaten by the king of Anga, a rich kingdom right next door. So Bimbisara, at just 15, launches this swift, successful campaign. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was pure strategic ambition. Taking Anga gave Magadha access to the Ganges Delta and these crucial sea routes, which opened up a flood of trade and wealth that would fund his entire empire. Then, he did something really smart. He appointed his own son, Ajatashatru, as governor there, giving him a front-row seat to how power and commerce really work. But look, Bimbisara was smart. He knew war was expensive and messy, so his second strategy was, maybe even more brilliant, marriage. He literally turned his enemies into family. He married Kosala Devi, the sister of the powerful king of Kosala, which not only ended their rivalry but also got him the wealthy city of Kashi as a dowry. Then he married Chalena from the powerful Lichavi clan, securing his western border. And he married Kshima from the Madra clan up in Punjab, stretching his influence all the way to the northwest. Each one of these marriages was a political treaty sealed with a vow. Now this whole philosophy, it was about to face its biggest test yet, with his most powerful rival, the kingdom of Avanti. After a bunch of battles, they were just stuck in a stalemate. Neither side could beat the other. So Bimbisara decided to change the game completely. And this next part? This is pure Bimbisara genius right here. Instead of celebrating that his rival was sick, Bimbisara saw an opening. He sent his own personal doctor, the famous Jivaka, all the way to Ujjain. Jivaka cured King Pradota, and that one single act of goodwill turned a bitter enemy into a lifelong friend. Bimbisara proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon you have isn't an army, it's an act of grace. You know, building an empire isn't just about conquering your neighbors. It's about keeping things stable at home. And in Bimbisara's time, that meant dealing with a huge spiritual revolution, because he lived at the exact same time as two of the most influential figures in world history, Gautama Buddha and Mahavira. And the way he handled this, wow, it was just masterful. To the Buddhists, he was a friend and a protector of the Buddha himself. He gifted them the famous Velavana monastery and is even said to have reached a stage of enlightenment. But then you have the Jains. To them, he was known as Shrenika, a devoted follower of Mahavira, so revered in fact that they believe he'll be reborn as the first great teacher of the next cosmic age. He didn't just tolerate these new faiths, he actively supported them, and that created a culture of religious harmony that was absolutely crucial for his kingdom's stability. But you know how these stories go. Just as the kingdom was prospering, something dark was starting to fester inside the palace walls. The very success Bimbisara had built was about to become the prize that would lead to his own downfall. And the story takes a tragic, almost Shakespearean turn. And this is where two key figures step into the spotlight. His son, Ajatashatru, who was proud, ambitious, and really impatient to be king, and Devadatta, the Buddha's own cousin, who was just eaten up by jealousy and a lust for power. Devadatta saw Bimbisara's support for the Buddha as a roadblock to his own twisted ambitions. So according to the Buddhist texts, Devadatta goes to the young prince with this just unbelievably venomous proposal. He saw that same ambition in Ajatashatru, and he preyed on his impatience, convincing him that the quickest way to the throne wasn't to wait, but to take it. He poisoned the prince's mind with the idea that killing his own father was the key to his destiny.
And the most tragic part? Ajatashatru listened. The son that Bimbisara had loved, the son whose every whim was apparently indulged, turned on him. The great king, the architect of this incredible empire, was arrested, deposed, and thrown into a cell. All the power he had so brilliantly built was just stripped away by his own flesh and blood.
So, we know he was imprisoned. That much is a fact. But what happened next? Well, that's one of ancient history's great controversies. How did Bimbisara actually die? The historical accounts give us two dramatically different and equally heartbreaking final acts. The historical records leave us with two totally conflicting stories. On one side, you have the Buddhist account, and it is a tale of pure cruelty. It says Ajatashatru starved his father, and when that wasn't fast enough, he sent a barber in to slice open the soles of Bimbisara's feet, and then they'd rub salt and fire into the wounds. In this version, the great king dies a slow, agonizing death. But then there's the Jain account, which is a story of a tragic misunderstanding. It says Ajatashatru had a change of heart, felt terrible, and grabbed an axe to rush to the prison and break his father's chains. But Bimbisara sees his son running at him with an axe and thinks he's about to be killed. So, to save his son from the terrible sin of killing his own father, Bimbisara takes poison that he had hidden and commits suicide. Two traditions, two absolutely heartbreaking endings. But here's the thing about a legacy like Bimbisara's, it doesn't just end with his death. Despite the horrific way he died, the empire he designed didn't crumble. In fact, the foundation he laid was so strong that it would support the ambitions of Indian emperors for the next 300 years. So when we boil it all down, what's his real legacy? Let's just tick off the 5 big ones. 1, he gave us India's first verifiable kingdom, taking us from myth into actual recorded history. 2, he created the blueprint for empire building with that brilliant mix of conquest and diplomacy. 3, he built a really sophisticated administration to manage it all. I mean, this was real governance, setting up village headmen to collect taxes and administer justice, connecting his capital to the 80,000 villages he supposedly ruled. 4, he championed religious tolerance in an age of massive spiritual change. And finally, and maybe most importantly, he built the political and economic foundation that the great Mauryan Empire would later be built on.
And if you look here, you can see exactly what I mean. The line is direct. The Haryanka dynasty that Bimbisara founded was followed by the Nandas, who made the empire even bigger. And it was that Nanda empire that Chandragupta Maurya would eventually conquer to create the Mauryan Empire, one of the largest empires in world history. Bimbisara didn't just build a kingdom, he literally laid the first stone of that entire magnificent structure.
Which leaves us with this one last big question. Bimbisara was a builder, a visionary, a diplomat. He was also a father who was betrayed in the most brutal way you can imagine. So how do we remember a figure like that? Does the greatness of what he built, this foundation for centuries of civilization, does that outweigh the personal tragedy and the violence that ended his own life? It's a question that history just kind of leaves us to think about. Thanks for tuning in.